I got a lot of stuff that I could equip all you wonderful queens with to look out for, to be honest with you. It can be
Yeah.
like Abby's self-help book or Abby's how to get rid of that balding potato from the back of your cupboard before it starts sprouting roots.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's those red flags, isn't it? How to identify the red flags and how to fucking run away from them
Mm.
rather than walk towards them and then just fucking endure them because we think we have to or because we think we need to. It's
Yes.
absolutely wild.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fine-ish. We are your hosts, Hayley and Abi, and today we are going to be deep diving straight into the wonderful world of shitty romantic relationships. Hayley, did you want to start with your experiences? Do you want to dive into it first?
Should we dive straight into the deep end, shall we? Fuck yeah, now. Where do I even start? I mean, how long do we have?
About 35 minutes.
35 minutes. I mean, this is going to be the Hayley show then, clearly, and I'm joking. You've got plenty you can say as well. Bloody hell. Shitty romantic relationships. Well, I think I've had my fair share of those. I think I was unfortunate in that I had most of mine as a young person, as a teenager. And I've actually been very blessed, even though I'm not religious, I'm going to say I'm very blessed in that since I've come out of adolescence, I've had a much better experience romantically. But fuck me. What was life like when I was a teenager?
That in my 30s, to be fair.
Whereas I've had a very different experience, haven't I, since I've been an adult. But when it comes to shitty romantic relationships, all I can say is it was more than shitty. I don't know what it is with men across the world, and I'm so sorry to the wonderful men that are listening. But there are so many shitty men out there that really like to hurt women. They take an awful lot of pride, or even if they don't feel pride from it, they take some sort of joy or pleasure. It fills this need that they might have. I don't even, every man will have their own reasons for treating women like shit. But that was essentially my experience from around the age of 10 or 11 when I first moved to Spain.
It's so young, isn't it?
I know. Well, even if I even just think about before relationships, before I had a boyfriend, just walking around as a young girl living in Spain, I'm assuming that it'll be the same for, English girls here. We used to get followed by men. We used to get whistled by men. We would get asked to do things with men in return for cigarettes or some alcohol. There would be this constant sexual harassment, and it was really wild, especially when you're so young. You don't really know what that means. And that's without even being in a relationship with somebody.
Yeah.
And then you find yourself in a relationship with a man and you really want to be loved and to be treated nicely. But instead of being treated nicely, you find yourself being treated like shit. Yet because you're so young, you don't necessarily know that that's not normal. And that's not what's meant to happen. So because you think that's what's meant to happen, you normalize the way that you're treated. And if you do that from a young age, then you're almost doomed to then end up having similar relationships for a long time. And I think, sadly, sorry, I've gone off on a tangent already, but essentially what I'm saying is that for me, I was met with mistreatment from men from moving to Spain. And then when I got into my first relationship with a shitty boy,
Shitty boy.
I know. It was normal for me to be treated in a particular way because that's how I'd been treated by other men that weren't, with me romantically. So I had 3 kind of main boyfriends as a young person. One of them was a very short relationship that didn't last too long. The second one lasted just a couple of months. And then I had a main relationship, which was 3 years. He was 5 years older than me and was extremely abusive in every way that you could possibly think of. And the worst thing is that I didn't know that he was being abusive, like at the very beginning. It was, there's, as I said, this normalization of being treated in a particular way until I started realizing further down the line that this isn't okay and I shouldn't be treated like this and I deserve better. I need to do something about this. But those experiences as a young person definitely shaped my view of men and of how I needed to be treated going forward to the rest of my life.
It does. It has a really big impact, doesn't it? And you're absolutely right. I think when you're young, you don't know what love is supposed to feel like. You don't know what safety with a man or boy is supposed to feel like because that's new to you. Like the difference as well with us is the growing up, the closest male person that I was close to was my dad. Whereas,
Mm,
so if you don't have that. So that's again a very different
yeah.
situation. And you've got these two different people with two different types of male role models in their life, then going out into the world. And then your first or the next experience that you have with a male is usually like a romantic interest. And so it
Yeah.
shapes you, doesn't it? It molds you and it teaches you what you think love is supposed to be. And then in your situation, like you said, you didn't notice that the things like the abusive things were happening or were abuse, because in your mind, hey, this is what it's supposed to be like. This is love. This must be what it's like, surely. Like, because you don't have
Yeah.
anything else to compare it to.
Absolutely. You've just raised something really important actually, which is the difference between kind of being raised with a father and being raised without a father. And I think, historically people have known that it can be really challenging for a child to be raised without one of their parents. We know that that's kind of not necessarily natural, not in the human world anyway. We've known that can cause problems. I've ever since I was little, I've heard of like daddy issues, this kind of term that gets thrown around. But I don't
Yeah.
think people ever really delved deeply into what that actually means for a person, especially for a girl that is being raised by a single parent. And for me, for example, I didn't know my father. I don't even like calling him my father. He is my sperm donor.
Sperm donor.
My
Yeah.
sperm donor, as Abby knows very well, I have nothing to do with my sperm donor and I don't want to have anything to do with him. He created me and that is it. And then decided that he did not want to be in my life anymore. So I
Mm.
was raised without having a father figure in my life. And I wasn't therefore shown what a good relationship looked like between a mother and a father. I didn't have a stepfather. My mother didn't have other relationships that lasted and that were kind of really positive and meaningful. So
Yeah.
I grew up without this baseline of what a good relationship looked like. And then on top of that, other boys and men in the area where I lived treated me, amongst all the other young ladies in the area, as if we were sexual objects. So then when I started a relationship, it was extremely normal for me to be treated in that way. Whereas I know that, or I imagine if I would have had a father figure in my life that would have been there, teaching me from a young age that I was worthy of respect and that men shouldn't treat me like that. And that, let's say that he was still with my mum, or even if they were separated, if they would have had a good, separated
Mm.
relationship, I perhaps would have had a different blueprint, I guess, of what relationship looked like. So I
Mm.
think I was almost doomed from quite a young age. I think I needed to go through the really challenging relationships that I did as a young person to then learn as an adult. But we know that sadly, not everybody does learn. I'm probably a bit of an exception. A lot of people end up in this vicious cycle of toxic relationships for all of their life if they're not careful.
Yeah.
Because you don't know any different, and some people don't grow, some people don't have the resources or the support networks to change their views of what a
Mm.
relationship should look like.
Yep.
So although it was really shitty, I'd like to say I'm now in a really, really great place and I know what a good relationship is and I know that I'm worthy of being treated like an absolute fucking queen. And I am treated like a
Yes,
queen now.
queen.
Yes, yes. So that's been a bit of my experience. Abby, tell us about yours. What were your teenage years then like? Did you have boyfriends?
Ew, boys, cuties. I did actually, yeah. So, God, I remember like my first ever, if you could call it this, first ever boyfriend being when I was in middle school, which is a school between primary school and high school. We're weird. We have middle schools. So I would have been probably about 9, maybe 10. And it was one of those days where somebody passes you a note and it says, will you go out with me? And then you write on it back, give it back to your friend, and they go and pass it along to the classroom, like to the other person. It was one of those situations. So I had like this little boyfriend. We'd like be together on the playground and we'd hang out, which was basically just standing next to each other. I think like one day maybe we played Kiss Chase and I found it so disgusting. I absolutely was never doing that again. And that was like the very first start to having a boyfriend. I had a boyfriend. So my first serious boyfriend was when I was 15 years old. And this is a weird story. So he was a year above me in school and he actually used to cyberbully me a little bit. And I know, very odd. Probably just sets the scene really for all of my relationships, I think. So one of his friends used to have a crush on me and I just didn't really like it. And so I would ignore like Bebo messages and MSN messages. I wouldn't really do too much to try and like act on it. And then his friend, who ended up being my boyfriend in the end, used to obviously defend his friend. And I remember he would post things on my Bebo page, basically calling me names and all sorts because I had basically rejected his friend, even though I didn't
Oh,
actually do anything. And so I was very scared of like being at school, and I was scared to open up my computer. And I was like, this was over the summer period. I went back to school in the September, and I wanted to join the show for the year, and he was going to be directing it. This guy who was technically cyberbullying me. And I was like, well, I'm not going to go for it because I don't want to see him. He terrifies me. Ultimately, I ended up being pushed into doing it by my drama teacher. Auditioned, it was for Wizard of Oz. I ended up getting Glinda, and it was really
Oh.
weird. He never spoke to me, never interacted with me, apart from one time, or it started at one point where I did my Glinda song and in rehearsals. And as I was going downstairs with my coat on, he went to the top of this stair balcony and he shouted down to me. And I thought, oh, here we go. He's about to insult me or something. And he complimented me and he said, that was really fantastic. That was really good. Like, I didn't realize you could sing like that. And da-da. And it was so confusing. And then we ended up talking a lot. We ended up doing the show together. We chatted on MSN, and then he invited me out on a date to the cinema. And then we ended up getting together. And it wasn't until probably a year later, we were only together for like 2 years. We were young. It wasn't until about a year later, we were sat randomly in a park. And I told him, and I said, "Hey, you used to cyberbully me, did you know?"
Mm.
And it clicked in his head and he remembered, and he cried his eyes out in this park, apologizing because he couldn't believe that he'd done that to me. And now, like, knowing who I was, he just said that all he could think of was that he just went on the defense for his friend and just thought I was a dickhead. And that was as far as he knew. He didn't even take the opportunity to get to know the situation. And that what I always found really weird, because it's like, even though it's your first boyfriend, already you're going into it in a really weird way, because it's like, hey, this person used to scare me. This person used to make me not want to go out in the summer and not want to go on my computer. And now he's the first person that I say I love you to. He's the person I give my virginity to. And it's very odd. This is also the person whose friend called me fugly, by the way, everybody, from the last episode.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so that was my like kind of teenage years thing. And because that was 2 years of my life, 15 to 17, and then we broke up before I went to university. That kind of felt like that was my whole teenage years just summarized. I was just basically in that relationship.
How long were you together for?
2 years, which seems
2
actually
years.
like quite a long time when you're 15. So if I'm through to from 15 to 17, that's a
Yeah.
lot of growing time really as a person. And
Mm.
to be in a relationship for that time, I think I knew deep down it was never going to be like this really romantic thing where you meet your childhood like partner and you end up growing old together. I knew it was never going to be that, but I think like back then, when just like linking on from the self-esteem stuff we did in the last episode, I just felt so lucky that someone
Mm.
wanted to be with me, and I was so shocked. I was like, oh my gosh, someone actually
Yeah.
finds me pretty. What is this? Oh my god. And so yeah, so it's interesting really that, you know, I didn't really have that many like experiences or anything, because I was in what I
Mm.
would have classed back then as a long-term relationship.
That's so interesting that the way that you view that, because you were so young, you kind of knew that it wasn't going to be your long-term relationship. You weren't going to get married. You kind of knew those things in your head. You recognized how young you were and you were still figuring out who you were. Meanwhile, when I was 15 to 17 years old, I was already a mum by the time I turned 15.
Yes.
So obviously my lifestyle at that time was very, very different to yours. And I was in a relationship with my son's biological father, who by that point was treating me extremely poorly. Yet I still so desperately wanted to be with him. And I wanted that relationship to remain forever, because all I ever dreamt of was having a family and not being a broken family. I had this real view of what a proper family looked like, and that's what I wanted. And I didn't want my child to grow up without a father. So, you know, all of those things were coming into play. So in my mind, I was like, yes, I'm only 15, but I can't wait to get married. I can't wait to have another, you know, not necessarily another child, because I think I've shared before, I didn't necessarily want other children, but I wanted this stable family life. So
Yeah.
it's so interesting, same age, yet the way that we were living and thinking was complete opposites, essentially.
Yeah.
That's
And
so
again,
wild.
I wonder if that does have something to do with our upbringing, in like just the way that we then viewed those things. I have no idea. Because I mean,
Yeah.
realistically for me, you know, my mum and dad were together when they were teenagers, and they stayed together. My sister and her partner, you know, they're still married, happily married. They were together since like 15 when they were teenagers. Everyone that I knew, there wasn't that many, but there was everyone who was in a romantic relationship or married in my family, they had been together since they were young. So it's interesting that I would go into it finding somebody and already just knowing deep down, this isn't going to last. I'm probably going to break this off before I go to uni. But I guess one thing that we touched on before was, you know, I was always somebody that didn't want to have kids. I was somebody that didn't really want to get married. I would have been perfectly happy on my own. So I don't know whether it just stems from that being like, hey, do you know what? I don't need this for my life. And do you know what? This has been lovely. This has been great. Thank you for the like losing my virginity and all that stuff. That was great. Not taking that into my uni years. But I think it's probably more of a case of like, hey, I've got so many adventures coming my way. This realistically was just a temporary thing just to get us through the school years, probably. Although I really hope he's not listening to this. I doubt he would be. I doubt he would be. But I bumped into his mum a few years ago. I was actually, I think that was only 2 years ago. It wasn't long. And it was lovely. Like, I haven't seen her. She was so lovely. She was such a
Mm.
lovely lady. Genuinely, I think I was just more heartbroken that I lost her from my life, to be honest.
Yeah.
I thought to her in Primark, of all places. And she was just there, like, arms up, like, oh my God. And, like, we had a big old hug. And like, she was just talking to me about everything I'd been up to. And obviously, like, I'd done quite a lot at this point. And
Mm.
she said to me, she was like, no, you were always the one that got away. You know,
Oh,
it was just the timings. The timings just didn't add up. You were always the one that got away. And I'm just there, like, my mum's trying not to laugh next to me because she obviously knows how I feel about that. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, 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 it's just timings, obviously.
yeah, of
Like, he's
course.
married, he's married now, you know, and he would have been married at this time as well. And I was just like, and
Yeah.
she said, what was it she told me? She said that at one point I'd like scratched my name into his bed, his wooden bed frame when we were together. Bearing in mind, what was that? So this like 15 to 17
Hmm.
years old, a very long time ago. She said he still has that bed and it's still got my graffitied name written on it. And she's telling me all of this. And I'm like, oh God, it's just not that deep. It's just not that deep. Like he was just the first boyfriend. Like it's not that deep.
Right. So I'm going to make a prediction here. Once our podcast has made it and we're known worldwide, that bed is going to get auctioned off for a lot of money. It's going to be a really expensive piece, like Beyonce's bra or something.
Oh my God, could you imagine? And it's just literally just for my signature of literally like 16-year-old me just scratching
Yeah.
into his
Yeah.
bed. Well, you know who you are if you're listening to this. Hold on to that bed because it might be worth a lot of money before you know it. Keep it safe. Don't cross the name out.
But I guess I'm wondering then, so you then went off to university and you've obviously had relationships since. So, and I left that really terrible relationship that I was in when I was 17 years old and met my husband around a year later and I've been with him since. So our experience has been, again, very different from
Yeah.
around the age of 17, 18. Now, when I left my shitty relationships during my youth, I developed very much this narrative in my mind that a lot of men are bad, but not all of them are bad. And I was still very desperate for love. And I still really wanted this family. I was really obsessed with developing a family. That's all I ever wanted. So I
Yeah.
became really fixated on finding that. And I'm actually very lucky that Manuel walked into my life because I think I was quite vulnerable to other men just coming and taking advantage of me as well. It just so happens that he's a good guy.
Yeah.
I was never a man hater or anything like that. And I feel like I learned quite a lot from those prior relationships. What was it like for you going from your kind of relatively short, quite, it was the only kind of experience you'd had really in a proper relationship? What was it like for you to then go to university and move on to other relationships?
So I would say at that point, I didn't leave that little relationship with like fear of love or anything like that. I didn't think anything of it. I just assumed that I would find somebody else. When I went to uni, I didn't want to be with somebody just because I was busy. I was doing other things. I didn't live in that place where I went to uni anyway. I did have a very temporary, the smallest amount of time. I had a boyfriend for like maybe 4 months, and that was just like a random thing that happened, and it just felt off. And so that just ended up like fizzling out after 4 months or so. And I didn't go into it with the idea of finding somebody. I think because when I went, it's obviously different. You didn't go to uni, did you? No. So it takes up a lot of your time and you're there meeting new people. You're in a brand new place. You've got to do visits home as well, or you want to do visits home. You're suddenly learning how to be an adult and living independently. The idea of having a boyfriend on top of all of that just wasn't really factored in, but it wasn't that I was opposed to it. It was just that I haven't got bloody time for any boys. So it was more probably that. Saying that though, and given the fact that I'd moved to this brand new city, I ended up meeting my long-term boyfriend. And this is like my longest relationship to date. I ended up meeting him when I went back home randomly, just like for a school
Mm.
holiday. And that was such a random thing that happened that it caught me off guard. But it was really wonderful, a really lovely start to a relationship. But I didn't have any there wasn't any like, God, I'm desperate for love or I'm not desperate for love or anything. I just really nonchalant about boys,
Mm.
I think, for that like those 2 years after that breakup happened when I was 18, 17.
And how was that relationship for you, that long-term one?
Do you know what? For the most part, it was actually really lovely. Yeah, I can't really fault it. And I think I probably could have if it was maybe like 2 years ago. But actually now reflecting back, it was the healthiest relationship I'd ever been in. And it was a bloody lovely relationship with a bloody lovely person as well. And we were together. I think it was like 9 years in the end. We were engaged and we just grew apart. But it was a really lovely, healthy relationship for the most part. And like we brought our first house together. We did basically all of the milestones of an adult, serious relationship. And I think had we not gotten together so young, because I met him when I was nearly 19, I think. I think I'd done 1 year of uni. Literally, I'd only done 1 year of uni, and then I met him in the summer that I came home. And yeah, had we not met so young, where we still had so much change, or I had so much change left in me, we probably could have made that work, actually, and probably would have stayed together until we were old and grey and shriveled up. But I think we just changed too much as people. But that was a nice relationship. One of the good ones.
It's so nice to sit here and hear you say that, because I know the person you're talking about. I agree. I always liked your partner at the time. I like me and my husband never saw any red flags, and we never disliked him as a person. If anything, we thought that he was lovely and wonderful, and we couldn't really say anything negative about him. Yeah, from our perspective, and we didn't even know you that well at the time. I think our relationship was still very early, but you just wanted very different things in life. We were kind of saying, it's probably best just to like break it off now rather than continue together when actually ultimately you are going to separate because your dreams and wishes aren't aligning.
Yeah.
But it's really nice for you to kind of reflect back and go, actually, it wasn't that bad in terms of when you were together. There wasn't anything really horrible. I was a bit worried you were going to turn around and say, do you know what? He was like really shitty behind closed doors, because that's not
No.
what we saw. So
No.
yeah.
And I think the experiences that I'm not kidding when I say that like shitty things have happened to me since I've turned 30. It's been the worst decade of my life so far, and I'm only 32.
Yeah.
All of that has stemmed from men, unfortunately, like really horrible experiences that I've had. And it's because of those. It shouldn't take having to see someone really shitty to appreciate someone who was a diamond, though. But unfortunately, that's what happened, and I look back now with not like with like upset or sadness and being regret or anything like that, because you're absolutely right, like that relationship needed to come to an end for both of us, and he's actually very happy now. I think he's getting married soon, and that's what he always wanted, and so he's now been able to have that chance, and that's all I would want for him. But yeah, no, I don't think it'll work. Like he did some stupid stuff, did some stupid things. He did, some stupid things when we first got together, when we were doing long distance, and he didn't tell me until like right near the end of our relationship, basically. At which point you can't even be mad at that point, because it was like 8 years prior. And I remember, I think it was 7 years prior. And I remember saying to him when he had like admitted this thing that he had done, he was a naughty boy. And I was like, I don't really know, I can't be angry at you because it was like 7 years ago. I just need to figure out how I need to handle this information that you've given me.
Yeah. How do I process this? Yeah.
Yeah. So he, I'm not going to put him on a pedestal and say like he was the most amazing person ever. I don't want to put anyone on a pedestal. The only person I should put on a pedestal is myself, and even then, I'm never going to do that. So he had his things that were stupid. He did some stupid boy things, and he stressed me out. I stressed him out, but for the most part, it was just a really equal, loving relationship where you feel like best mates at the same time. I think the thing for us was just that I didn't feel like I'd gone anywhere in life. I didn't want kids. I didn't want marriage. He wanted kids. He wanted marriage. He didn't admit it at the time, but I know that that's what he wanted. And I think he was quite content with the hobbies he had and the life he had, whereas I was always wanting more. I wanted more from this. I wanted to see more. I wanted to do more. I want to earn more money. I want to go on holidays. I want to travel the world. And we couldn't make it work between the two of us. But so in regards to shitty romantic relationships, equally, if you are also listening to this person who I've been talking about, I would not put him in the shitty relationships category. I would put him in healthy relationships. Unfortunately, didn't work out, but for the best. You're a prick sometimes, but ultimately, 95% of the time, you're an all right dude.
Agree. Yeah, agree. Cool dude, nice guy.
Cool dude, nice guy, genuinely, just absolutely fine. And it's amicable as well, which is really lovely. Even after all of that time, I think if I saw him in the street, I would generally go up and say hello and have a bit of a catch up. So, I mean, he might listen to this. We follow each other on social media still. You are welcome if we get famous, and then you end up getting famous because everyone's worked out who I'm talking about.
So what happened post that person? I'm diving straight into it now. Because it was interesting that you said that although it's not directly this, but it almost has taken you to have experienced some shitty things since then, to be able to then reflect back that relationship, although it wasn't perfect, it also wasn't a shitty relationship, and there were good things about it. Whereas when that breakup first happened, you were not in a good place.
Yeah.
Although it was amicable, it was still really emotionally challenging, wasn't it, for quite a long time. It's interesting what you've just said around it's kind of taken the years after and the experiences you've
Yeah.
had due to really shitty men to help you look back in that in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever you're ready
Yeah.
to share.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is genuinely getting into like the shitty relationships category now. So I then unfortunately, God, I wish I could go back in time so much. I unfortunately met somebody who, admittedly, at the start of our relationship, genuinely seemed like a really lovely guy. I thought he was great. I thought I was really lucky. He was into the same sorts of things as me. He had the same values as me. He didn't want kids. He didn't want marriage. He also wanted to go and have adventures. He also liked to just go camping randomly and slum it in the car to save some money on accommodation. He didn't take life too seriously. He was funny. And that was, in the grand scheme of things, it was only 3 years. 3 years. But my God, those 3 years, if I could take them back in a heartbeat, I would. I would. Because he ended up being a very, very horrible man. I don't know whether I can't say for definite. I can't say whether he did it multiple times or whether it's just the once. But he ended up having an affair with somebody who was like in her 50s. And she was a doctor of archaeology. I better not say where, because otherwise, I might get done. She was a doctor of archaeology somewhere. And the annoying thing is we were supposed to be going on a trip away, weren't we? The four of us, me, you, Manuel, him, and me, to Amsterdam. And we realized that there was this archaeological dig thing that was happening around the same time that he really wanted to go to. He really wanted to pay this money so he can go and be part of it. And because I'd encouraged him to go and start his degree with the Open University and try to start bettering his life, I said, no, don't worry about coming on holiday. I will just go with them. I would rather you do this thing because it's going to be really helpful for your career. And ultimately, that's what's important to me because it's important to you. So I encouraged him to do this thing. And that's where he met this woman. And they started a whole like true love affair. And he was like sneaking away for weekends. He was lying. He was hiding things. It was just so awful. And it wasn't until after we'd broken up that I actually met up with one of his friends who told me that actually he's always been like this. He's always been known to cheat. So I can't say for definite if it was just that or whether he'd been doing it the whole time. And it's just horrible because you don't know if at any point any of what you felt or what they felt was genuine, and you start to look at everything so differently. And I find myself, even now, even though it's been like a year, I find myself going through memories in my head with like a microscope, and I'm trying to analyze everything that he would have said or how he was and work out whether it was fake. And it messes with you. And the worst thing is that I knew as well. I knew that he was having an affair of some kind. I knew he was cheating. I just didn't have cemented evidence at this point. But it really destroyed me. I think like people would tell me, like my friend who I work with every single day, she was noticing that I was losing weight. I was becoming sick. I was passing out. I passed out when I was driving one time and couldn't work out why. I couldn't sleep. I was crying all the time. I was having panic attacks in my car. And this was before I even found out about the affair because I knew that he was up to something. And I didn't want to believe it because, again, it's this question of like, well, is this what we think love is supposed to be? How, am I just being a bit emotional? Like you try and find every reason for that not to be the case because you don't want it to be, because you know that if that's the case, then you've got a shit show coming your way. And it hurts so much that your brain goes, well, we're just not going to believe it. We're just not going to make this not true. We're going to come up with a rationale for every single thing that you find. And the thing is, he knew that I was breaking. He knew that he saw it. He saw that I was becoming unwell. He saw that I was depressed. There was one point where I'd gone on to antidepressants and I left my antidepressants out, and he called through from the bathroom and he said, have you started antidepressants again? And I remember being really tense because I didn't want him to find out. And I remember going, yeah, like that, calling back, and then nothing. Silence. He just carried on with his day, never mentioned again, never wanted to like talk about it. Like, oh, do you want to talk about it? I think that for me is almost harder to handle than him actually having the affair. Because like having the affair is like, yeah, okay, that's a really shitty thing to do. But actually to see the person who loves you most in this world, who you're supposed to love most in this world, break in front of you, is that they're like, you don't know whether or not they're going to like see you in the next week or not because they're so fragile, passing out, not eating and not doing anything about it, but continuing to do the thing that's causing that is just absolutely devastating to me.
I'm with you on that. Do you remember the thing that kind of upset me the most about part of the situation was that I came down to visit you. You were really not okay. That was one of the weekends that he was away, supposedly with a friend or another couple. You had suspicions still that he was with somebody. This was before you realised he was cheating. And then when I came back up to Manchester, we agreed, didn't we, that I would contact him because I was extremely worried for you, and we came up with a bit of a plan that we felt would help you going forwards. And part of that plan was, I'm not leaving unless I know for sure that he knows that this is what I'm concerned about, so that he can support you take these steps. And he didn't reply to me, did he?
No. And it was like the first time someone had like ever said, probably reached out to him, like, I'm really worried about Abby's welfare.
Really
Like,
serious, genuinely really serious concerns, stuff that nobody should ignore. If somebody you know contacts you about a loved one with the level of concern that I was expressing, that's not something that you would ignore. And I did not get a reply. And that was a massive, massive red flag. Yet we still, well, you didn't have the evidence, did you, that he was cheating? And we were questioning, like, why hasn't he responded? And even then, we were both justifying why he hadn't responded because we didn't want to believe that he genuinely didn't give a shit, essentially, about your well-being at the time. And looking back, that's what makes me so fucking mad. If you hadn't have made it, like if you would have passed out whilst you were driving and crashed, or if you would have, I don't know, like just something would have happened where you either died or ended up taking your own life, for example, because of the place that you were in, it breaks my heart that I was relying on him to be the person that was looking out for you. Yet he actually didn't give a shit. Like for that, he can go and rot in hell, genuinely.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing that, like I said, that's the thing that gets me as well. Like I could just about handle the idea of like the affair because you can kind of be like, well, you meet people, blah, 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 you're just too much of a coward to tell your partner. But I think like the deliberate fact, like just, I don't know, it just really doesn't sit well with me that people can be like that. And that's when I start to think of them as like narcissists. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot. I get that. Like everyone's just apparently a narcissist because, they've wronged you in some way. But that's when I genuinely start to think it because it was like he was deliberately trying to break me, make me small. He had so many opportunities to tell me that he wanted to leave or not be with me anymore. He could have come up with an excuse rather than say he'd met someone, but he didn't, which makes me think he wanted this little life. He wanted the roof over his head. He wanted financial support. He wanted me to love him. He wanted me to support him. He wanted to have this career that I was pushing him to do. But he also wanted this fantasy world with this woman. And because of the role that she had in archaeology, it wouldn't surprise me if he was like knobbing her. I'm trying to like downplay that, knobbing her to like pick himself up in his career and get him a little bit further afield.
Yeah.
It would not surprise me. But apparently she's married with kids as well, well, maybe not kids because, she was in her 50s, so they would have been a little bit grown up now. But like, does he know she was doing it? So it's like, is that two people now who are just absolute assholes who have no care or respect for any other person? I have no clue. He is probably number one on my list for shitty relationships because he ticked every single box of what you could do in a relationship that's shitty. And what? Just for anyone listening who does happen to know who he is, just to make me feel a bit better, the audacity of that man, because honestly, if you were to see photos of him now, what was I thinking? When I was with him, he never washed his pants. He would run out of pants all the time. And I said to him at some point, I was like, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not being your mum. I'm not washing all of your stuff for you. You are quite capable of using a washing machine. And he wouldn't. I swear to God, he would reuse pants and he would go like without brushing his teeth. He'd go to work without brushing his teeth. And I'm like, sometimes I reflect on it and I'd be like, oh my God, I broke myself for a man who didn't even brush his teeth. But
it's wild, isn't it? The things that we do, us women, and the things that we endure for that, to be treated like that. And something I just wanted to pick up on, actually, Abby, was you mentioned the word narcissist and how that word is kind of thrown around quite a lot. But actually, for him, it might well represent who he actually is. Something I just wanted to pick up on is that I think in toxic relationships, we quite often hear that there's a diagnosis involved. So one that I'm hearing at the moment quite a lot is that, a man might have autism or ADHD, for example, or another diagnosis, and they start to use that to justify some of their shitty behaviors. And I just want to make it really clear here for anybody listening, regardless of a diagnosis, a condition, a need that you have, nothing, absolutely nothing should justify treating somebody like a piece of shit. Like, it's absolutely not okay. You can have a diagnosis of autism or ADHD or, whatever it might be. That does not make you a shitty person. I think it's really important we say that, because what I worry about nowadays is that as we've become more aware of different conditions, that we feel that we have to be more lenient and we need to be more understanding and supportive and try not to judge people based on their diagnoses. And I'm all for that. But the thing that I'm worried about is that women are going to do what we do. We're going to pretend we're fine and we're going to feel bad for them. We're going to feel guilty and we're going to let ourselves be treated like shit because we feel bad for them and because they can't help it. It's not their fault they've got this condition. No, absolutely not. But I just want to make that really clear. That makes me really
Absolutely.
cross.
100%. He had a brain tumor, and I'm pretty sure like he blamed some of his stuff on his medication, and I was like, fuck off. No,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
having it. But yeah, so just that was up there with shitty things. And I think, to be honest, we could probably have a whole episode on things like cheating, because there's a lot of things that I would love for people, like women, to hear, and men to hear, that like were warning signs that I ignored, just in case it's helpful for people who are maybe like suspecting their partners, or they want to make sure they're more equipped if they go into another relationship, they know what to look out for. So I think maybe doing an episode on things like that would be quite helpful, because I got a lot of stuff that I could equip all you wonderful queens with to look out for, to be honest with you. It can be like Abby's self-help book, or Abby's how to get rid of that balding potato from the back of your cupboard before it starts sprouting roots.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's those red flags, isn't it? How to identify the red flags and how to fucking run away from them rather than walk towards them and then just fucking endure them because we think we have to or because we think we need to.
Yes.
It's absolutely wild. Absolutely wild.
Don't be a moth, be a butterfly. Don't fly to the light. Fly. I don't actually know what do they. I'm guessing butterflies just, they don't go inside, do they? Don't be a moth. Be a caterpillar.
I was just going to say that butterflies come from big fat caterpillars, so I'm all for that because I used to be a big fat caterpillar and I'm a beautiful butterfly. So
I completely disagree, but there's no point in saying anything. Hayley, don't say such horrible things because she won't stop.
I won't stop. As we kind of already established in the last episode, we just talk shit about ourselves all the time because, our self-esteem is in the drains.
From Bug's Life, do you know where he ends up getting the little butterfly wings on the end, and he's like, I'm a beautiful butterfly.
Oh my God, I need to go and watch that movie again. It's been a really long time. Okay, so in terms of just to move towards the end, so we've both had our fair share of shitty experiences. Yours has been much more recent than mine. Mine was kind of during my teenage years, but we both left those relationships absolutely destroyed to the point where we kind of in our own ways, both of us almost didn't survive them. How did we survive? Oh, the fuck, are we still standing here after those really toxic, really shitty romantic relationships?
Do you know what? I would love to be able to say, oh, you just take the time to heal and see your friends and do things that you love, and then all of a sudden you just feel so much better. But do you know what? It just doesn't work like that, guys. It just doesn't. He did really stupid things when I kicked him out. Ended up meeting somebody else really quickly who ended up being terrible. God, he was just like, I hate to think what he would have turned out like if I stayed with him much longer. In the end, I had to kick him out of my house because he terrified me, because I thought he was going to bash my head into a wall. And that was the final straw. So I was actively putting myself in a situation that I knew was bad. I knew he was a shit person. He terrified me. I was so scared. I was crying almost every night because of him rather than the other one. I was drinking far too much. I drank so much that I actually had to work with my therapist to try and stop drinking because it was getting a problem. I was becoming rude to people. I was becoming a bit of a cunt, if I'm honest. I was just making very shitty decisions. And then I'd feel like it would pick up a little bit and I would get back on track, and then I would just go 2 steps back. It was just not linear. And I wish so much that, you would probably say the same. I wish so much that we could say, oh, hey, we just took some time out for ourselves and then we just got better. It didn't. It really didn't.
I do have a saying here. I actually know what I'm talking about on this one. One of the things that I love telling people at work is that progress isn't linear. 3 simple words, but we often assume that when you come out of a difficult situation or when you're making progress, even if it's something like with your studies, we expect progress to be linear and to like go up, right? Whereas actually what the reality is it goes up and down. It's very up and down. You will have the highs, you will have the lows, you will then be kind of stable, then you'll go back down again. Sometimes you have to take 3 steps back before you take 2 steps forwards. And I think that's really important for us to acknowledge. And I think that's been both of our journeys have been very much like that. It was the same for me when I left my very abusive relationship at the age of 17. I had a year before I met my husband. So although things have been okay since I've been with him, and we will talk about my marriage in a separate episode because that's been up and down in its own ways.
Mm-hmm.
But for a year, I was absolutely lost as well. And I put myself in some really dangerous and vulnerable positions and did some really stupid things that are just not part of who I am. It's not part of my personality. But I feel like I needed to take those steps and find myself in those shitty situations to be able to come out the other side. And I believe it is all part of the journey. I know that sounds really like cliche and ugh, but actually I do believe we're on this really fucking wild journey through life. We're all just plodding along, winging it, pretending we're fine when we're really not fucking fine. But ultimately, today, as we record, we're both in a better situation. Obviously, very different situations. We're both, different points in our life. But that shitty person is no longer in your life. The shitty person that I'm kind of referring to is not in my life. And we're able to move forwards and hopefully one day not have to be treated like shit by a man or a woman. Whatever relationship we're in. By
anybody, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. So yeah, what is it? A year for me, it was a year for you before we finally started to actually feel back on track. And you know what? Anyone who's listening to this and who has had shitty experiences, who also think, I just don't see it getting better, there is always going to be an element of it still being with you. It's going to turn into something, it's going to become part of your identity. And there isn't much you can do about that. You can try and avoid it, you can run away from it, but it's always going to sit with you. What you want to do is just try and acknowledge it and say, hey, do you know what? This is part of who I am now. But rather than being, remorseful and sad and angry that it happened, think about it as when I meet somebody new, what am I now going to look for? How am I going to prioritize myself? What do I need to do to protect myself in this situation? And it's going to feel a bit like a minefield out there. Trust me, I know it's shit. It's literally awful. It's like when you're in Mario Kart and you're so close to the finishing line and someone gets you with a fucking blue shell and it's just like, it's literally what it's going to be like to date. But you're going to be more in tune with yourself. You're not going to put up with as much shit. So you turn that anger, you turn that horrible experience into something that is helpful for you going forward. So, yeah.
And the impact, as you've said, the impact of some of those relationships, that might stay with you for a very long time, if not forever. I'd love to talk about this more in depth in another episode. We can go into the psychology of what happens and the impact it has on our brains and all of that. I think we need to talk about this much more in depth. But what I will say is, as somebody that escaped that relationship that I was in at the age of 17, I'm now 32 years old, and I've been in a very stable, generally speaking, very happy marriage for the last 13 years. We've had lots of ups and downs, but no violence or abuse or anything like that. And to this day, those 3 years of my adolescence where I was treated horribly still show up in my marriage. That impact is still very evident there. And I think we can talk about that more going forward, Abby. In another episode, we can talk about the impact in our future, the way that men, how men treat us can impact the way that we see ourselves and future relationships. Because I think that's where people struggle, don't they? Is how can I have a successful, stable, healthy relationship in the future when maybe all I've known is shitty relationships? So I think that brings us quite nicely to my favorite part of our episodes, which is where we ask, who do we ask? We ask Bob. For anybody that doesn't know, this is our chat GPT. We call him Bob. So we ask Bob a question at the end of every single episode. And the question that we would really like to ask Bob today is, ChatGPT, Bob, how can we tell if we're in love or if we're just responding to familiar emotional patterns from the past? I'm going to guess that a lot of people can resonate with this, Abby.
Yeah, I reckon.
So ChatGPT says, telling the difference between being in love and responding to familiar emotional patterns from the past isn't always obvious because trauma and attachment often feel intense, and intensity is easily mistaken for love. One key difference is how your body feels over time. Love tends to feel steady, grounding, and safe, even during conflict. Key. I'm going to just say that's really key there. Trauma-driven attachment often feels like emotional highs and lows, excitement that then follows by anxiety, relief followed by fear, closeness followed by panic or doubt. God, I'm really resonating with a lot of this.
I know. I'm like nodding along, and I'm like, even now, and I'm just going, shit, I feel seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Another clue is what's being activated. If you feel a strong urge to prove yourself, to be chosen, to fix, to rescue, or to earn affection, that's often an old pattern replaying rather than mutual love unfolding. Love does not require self-abandonment to survive. I love that as a psychologist. I'm like, yes, ChatGPT. So pay attention to who you are becoming in your new relationship. Love should expand you, or more like yourself, not less, whereas trauma patterns often shrink you and you become hypervigilant, preoccupied, or disconnected from your needs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, Bob, thank you. Absolutely. I agree with everything Bob has just said.
I feel like that's just like a massive tick box on my life. Like, oh, damn, Bob, that was sore.
Yeah. But healing is possible.
Yes.
And it is possible to have healthy relationships, and you're fucking worthy of a healthy relationship. And you know, it's better to be on your own than to be in a toxic relationship.
Hell yeah, it is.
It's the same for parents as well. Like, I think often parents say, oh, we're not going to separate until the children are older, you know, because we don't want to, you know, damage the children. And I'm like, you do realize that it's more damaging to be in a toxic relationship and let your children observe that and experience that growing up. Just separate, have a mutual co-parenting, healthy relationship. That's going to be far more beneficial for the children than you having this really toxic home environment.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, blimey. Well, I feel like that was a bit of an intense one, to be honest. But equally, I feel like there's a lot of people out there that probably listened to some of those stories and thought, fucking yes, that's me. And you know what? It's horrible if you are one of those people that have been thinking that. Genuinely, we feel for you because it sucks. If we could just have a magic wand that made it so no one ever had to feel that way, we would in an instant. But just remember that you need to just reach out to people that you love, people in your life. Use the opportunity to get to know yourself as a person and things that you love and will bring you joy. And remember that you don't need a person in your life to bring love, because there's other people who can do that. Your love for yourself is the most important thing. And if you have to go the rest of your life on your own with your friends and your family doing really cool, amazing stuff with no boy leaving his dirty pants with his skiddies everywhere, then that's not so bad, girl. That is not so bad.
And if anyone is listening and really resonates or has questions or things that they would like us to cover in future episodes, please do reach out to us on Instagram, or please leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube. We'd be more than happy to cover information in further episodes. I think this is something that people will really resonate with. Girls, you've got this. You've got this.
You got this, queens. Mwah. You got this.
I'm not an affectionate person, so I'm not sending kisses.
Neither am I, but I don't have to touch anybody. Everyone can have kisses. Mwah, you get a kiss. Mwah, you get a kiss, but not in real life. Don't touch me in real life.
Anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of Fine-ish Podcast. We hope that you've really enjoyed this one. If not enjoyed, maybe taken something away from it. And we look forward to future episodes.